Hello and welcome to another episode of Attacking Third, a CBS Sports soccer podcast. I'm Sandra Herrera, lead NWSL writer for CBS Sports, joined today, as always, by my colleague and co-host Lisa Roman, broadcaster and analyst for CBS Sports. On today's show, we have a news and notes episode for everybody. Let's chat about all things women's plus soccer. Quick reminder before we get into everything, vote for us. In case you haven't heard, we're nominated in the Signal Awards for Best Episode. We could not do it without you, the listener. So thank you all so much for your support. Please, please, please click the link in the episode description or use the QR code on the screen. And please vote for us. It only takes a second. It would really mean so much. Best Christmas gift ever? Question mark. IDK. We're going to kick off the holidays here at A3. So happy Hanukkah to everybody out there who are celebrating and who acknowledge the holiday. And we've got things like Christmas coming up and then Kwanzaa afterwards, Boxing Day, all of the good things coming up. New Year's on the horizon. So we're kicking things off. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. I love that you mentioned Boxing Day because fully American over here, but Boxing Day is huge in my life because of the football that you get to watch, the soccer that you get to watch. And that was actually like the big topic of conversation over the past couple of days with my in-laws and their family about where are we going to watch the games? Are we going to go to a soccer bar? Are we going to stay home and watch them? It's like bigger than Christmas and anything like that is Boxing Day and getting to watch these games. But I'm good. I am ready for this final week before the holidays. My birds are doing really well. The Eagles, I'm repping them today because they're just crushing it right now. 13-1. Keep cruising. They also play on Christmas Eve, which rarely happens for the Eagles. So that's a really big thing for us as well. So I've got Eagles on Christmas Eve. I've got Boxing Day. But I'm ready for this week to really chat about all this news because you and I haven't talked too much about the trade rumors and the free agency rumors that have been flying around right now, especially involving Debinha. So I want to get into that. But first, how are you? How was your weekend, Sandra? Are you getting ready for the holidays?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, I think been ready for the holidays. We've chatted a little bit about the holidays already. We definitely got our fall girl vibes in there and got that energy going. And now we're full throttle into the winter season for sure. I'm also rocking the hat. Really love this holly hat. I was like, gotta get it, gotta rock it. Perfect for the holiday energy. But I'm excited. I love this time of year. It's my favorite. One of my favorite times of the year, outside of the soccer calendar, right? Time with friends, time with family. Tamales, always love that. So I'm excited, and I hope everyone else has a good holiday. And because I know the holidays aren't easy for everybody out there. So if they're not, I just want to say felices fiestas to you, and hopefully you find a little bit of R&R rest and relaxation during this time as well. But I think you said the magic words there. I think you said the magic words. I think you said Debinha. I think we gotta talk about it. Let's get into some soccer, baby. So let's chat a little bit about some rumor news. Let's just call it a rumor mill that's out there right now. We all know heading into this NWSL offseason that Debinha was on that free agency list in this offseason here, probably if not the biggest, the absolute main target in terms of the talent that is available out there right now in this offseason. And we had wondered if there was going to be any type of announcement really before the new year regarding this player and her options. Formerly with North Carolina Courage, has been in the NWSL for quite some time now, has really nothing left to prove. I know you and I were also, we were chatting about this point in time in the year, how we're already about 2 weeks out from the new year, and how somebody like Debinha hasn't essentially either re-signed with the Courage or found a different team in the NWSL. So what could that mean, and what does that look like for this player? And I think it sort of sounds like she's a player of a certain caliber that is exploring all options in front of her. And I love that.
I agree completely. I mean, she was, for me, the biggest name on the NWSL free agency list, hands down. This is a player that is in the prime of her career, Brazilian international. She took North Carolina on her back last year. I mean, they end up winning the Challenge Cup. And then throughout the season, she's in contention for the Golden Boot race when her team wasn't really in contention for the playoffs at that point. And she's still racking up goals, going on tears and going on runs about what this North Carolina team could do throughout this season and just imposing a lot of challenges on their opposition. So the smartest thing for a player like Debinha to do is to explore every single option. Now, you and I have talked about this as well. There are a lot of perks for Debinha to stay in North Carolina. It's a team she's been with since 2017. Recently, her Brazilian international teammate, Caroline, has signed on with her, and that partnership was just fire flames last year to watch those two play together. And I think that it provides a lot of fun for a player like Debinha to be able to combine with someone that is so like-minded with how you're going to play, and you can just feed off of each other and read one another throughout the game. However, she has the leverage, being such an incredible athlete and player, to use that to her advantage and maybe get a little bit more money out of her contract, because that is definitely something she deserves. Maybe play where she wants to play, be under coaches she wants to be with. There's been a lot of talk about where she could go in this league or in the world of women's football right now, because it's a type of player that that when you add Debinha to your midfield, you're changing the way you're playing, right? You can't just go with a typical midfield. You have to shift a little bit and lean into what Debinha can give you. And that means giving her a lot of freedom to roam wherever she wants to go on the pitch, getting into the attack, combining, getting goals and pushing forward, really kind of cramming space up sometimes for your forwards. But that's what a type of player like Debinha is going to do. So there are definitely teams that maybe would say, hey, we don't need her at this point. Yeah, we'd love to have her, but that makes us have to change a lot of different things tactically with what we're doing, and we're not ready for that yet. But one of the biggest rumors right now is Debinha heading over to England and going to play in the Women's Super League. Arsenal, there's been a lot of talks about Arsenal interested in Debinha. What do you think about that?
I think it would be perfect. Listen, you hate to talk about it in this aspect in terms of Arsenal and the impact that they felt from recent injury. They already lost Beth Mead to an ACL, and most recently, Vivian Miedema. We'll chat a little bit more about that, but I think it's the most glaring hole in the roster for Arsenal. It's like, where's the attack going to come from? Where's the offensive production going to come from? So I listen, I don't. I would imagine that those conversations or those phone calls or those emails or whatever have escalated, maybe to a point where they maybe weren't prior to losing some big names like that. But I think at this point, if there's not a ton of chatter around the Courage or maybe a different NWSL side, I would anticipate that the global market is as wide of an option for Debinha as well. So I mean, look, at this is not. It wouldn't be Debinha's first time playing in Europe in general. It wouldn't be her first time playing outside of the United States. Her arrival to NWSL came with experiences in Brazil, Norway, China briefly. So I think we got to see with her time here in NWSL, we got to witness something very, very special. I think this player grew in ways that, maybe she didn't anticipate. I think when you think of Brazilian players, you think of, the general culture of Brazilian football and sort of apply that to those players, like, oh, they could be flashy on the ball, sometimes very technical, a lot of techers with the balls at their feet. But I think what we saw with somebody like Debinha sort of kind of becoming this really all around solid, amazing player. And you're talking about including, defensive development for this player, that this was the type of player, a Brazilian player who can, play on both sides of the ball here. So to sort of see that development over time, with her playing in NWSL, and I'll just say it again, what she's achieved during her time playing in NWSL. We're talking about, an MVP finals, title, multiple NWSL titles, has racked up goals, has racked
Yeah.
up assists. I don't know and or think that there is anything left to prove for this player in this league. And I think you also have to keep in mind, um, the career of a certain of specific players. They're looking at the timeline and longevity of their careers. And, is this a point in time in Debinha's career where she's ready for a new challenge or a new environment or wants to achieve something else, especially going into a World Cup year for
Yeah.
Brazil, where they're ranked, top 10 and can also be considered contenders, right? So I think there's a lot of understandable rumor connecting of the dots,
Yeah.
between Arsenal, between Debinha would be like a great fit, I think, in terms for that roster. But is it going to be a great fit for that player? There's all
Yes.
those things that come into mind too. So I'm a little curious if maybe there's additional recruiting going on, like what Debinha got to, Norway because she had a teammate there in Rosanna, and there was chatter about that, and she got to Norway. Is Rafael going to be part of this recruiting for Arsenal, and is she going to ensure that making good pitch
I
essentially,
know.
to try to get her Brazilian teammate over there. We'll see. It's fun to talk about for sure.
It's so fun to talk about. I mean, some of the rumored teams, obviously, we've touched on Arsenal and the fact that they could really use a scoring threat right now. Manchester United, Barcelona, PSG, these are all teams that have expressed interest in a player like Debinha, as well as several NWSL teams. But like, imagine Debinha in Champions League right now, playing with the type of competition that Europe has at this point. Everyone joining us live on YouTube, I love hearing what you guys have to say. TJ Trek saying that they think that she's going to Europe. We've also got people saying that she's going to England. Lucy giving a shout out to Debinha and her contract, saying it's time to get paid if you are Debinha. I could not agree more. And Barry Schaefer, of course, our North Carolina stan that's always with us. Thanks for joining us, Barry. He thinks she's going to stay with North Carolina Courage. I know you would like that, Barry. But there's a lot to kind of keep track of in terms of where she could go, everything that's happening. And at this point in her career, is she looking towards the end in the sense of like, hey, where does she want to finish out her career at that point? I don't think she's quite there yet, right?
No.
I don't think we're at that point. I mean, she's not on the younger side of things. She's 30, 31, I believe. So this is a player that has also experienced a lot of different things. She has played in Brazil. She's now played in the NWSL. She's played in Norway. She's played in China as well, I believe. So I think that going to a European team, perhaps in England, that could be a new exciting challenge for her. I know Arsenal would love to pick her up, but at this point in the season, like, how much more is she going to have to play with them? And then the NWSL season starts again. Like, there are just so many factors that come into it. And then, of course, the World Cup, because this is a player that wants to lift that World Cup trophy at the end of August in 2023.
Yeah, and we're look, I think a lot of folks are throwing Arsenal into the loud ring,
Right.
of potential landing spots for Debinha because of what they've gone through on the injury side of things. Gunners losing Minima to an ACL, saying she announced that she ruptured her ACL, and that's what brought her out of the game against Arsenal during their Champions League matchup on Thursday, December 15th. I think in the moment, watching it happen too was just really, really heartbreaking. Just gutted for this player. We talk about these athletes, and these are people who know their bodies so incredibly well. And you could just sort of see, if nothing else, in the body language of things in the moment, that it probably wasn't going to be good news, or at the very least was a painful moment for Minima. So to see her kind of come out of the game and then have this update from the player of it's a ruptured ACL, it was tough. And it also it was another one. I hate to be that way, but it's like this ongoing list of ACL injuries for players globally. This isn't just like continent to continent, country to country kind of thing. It's everywhere. Like 2022 has had a massive, um, collection of players who have been dealing with various ligament injuries, ACL
Yeah.
specifically. I've lost count at this point. I
I
know
know.
it's got to be over 50 at some point.
Mhm.
Like it's yeah, it's a lot, and there's been a lot of great stuff that's been written about it out there. I know Samantha Lewis has some good
Mhm.
stuff, and Sam Mewis actually talked a little bit about
Yeah.
climate change and the impact of that on the game, and you could catch that at the Athletic. So there's a lot of it's on the radar, is what I'm saying, in terms
Yeah.
of this possibly
I
even being considered like a little bit of an epidemic across women's pro sports.
I know. It's devastating. This is an injury that has unfortunately followed soccer around as one of the sports that gets hit with ACLs more than any other sports. And it is often females versus males that get hit with this injury as well. And there are so many ACL prevention um, knowledge and education and resources and PT and strengthening that you can do out there. But I think there becomes something deeper when you have over 50 notable women's soccer players being hit with this injury, all within such a short amount of time. That's what's crazy between Miedema and Mead, and then even the United States players. There are so many U.S. internationals that have also been hit with ACL injuries just this year. I mean, it's devastating, and it's really heartbreaking for those players because it's not such a simple recovery. We know how long it is. We know how difficult it can be. And that's something that I'm hoping that the sports psychologist people out there and sports science people are taking a look at the conditions that these athletes are playing on, whether it's turf, whether it's grass, whether it's hard frozen ground, because all of those things play a factor into it. The shoes that the athletes are wearing, whether they're playing soccer and their football cleats and their boots that they're putting on, or it's their running shoes. There are just so many factors that come into this. And in order to have these players be at the very top of their game, this is something that needs to be taken a deeper look at. And I know there are people out there doing that, but it needs to become not 50 people in 1 year getting hit with this type of injury and suffering this. It needs to happen sooner and better with different science or a different look at how these players are training and recovering. And they play a lot of soccer, right? They do. And is that a factor of it? I mean, it's devastating. I've had a handful of knee injuries myself, and it sucks. It sucks. I'm
To
going to
put
be
it,
very frank. It
yeah,
sucks.
just to put it lightly, right? It sucks.
Yeah, it sucks. You're sidelined from for these players, their career, their job that they're doing right now, their passion. And not only that, but it's impossible to get around when you're doing that. And now all of your recovery and all of your time and your energy goes into recovering in PT and getting back to being at the top of your games. An impossible task that seems like it's an incredible uphill battle. But in a little bit of a transition here, one of the players that has suffered an ACL, Katarina Macario, it has been reported that she is coming back and she's working really hard and she's recovering and she's expected to be back
Yeah.
pretty soon at this point. We talk about it in towards the end of December, but in terms of trade and what could happen there, this is another rumor, Sandra, I want to throw at you.
Yeah.
Katarina Macario, her contract with Lyon runs through the end of the summer of 2023. There's been some trade rumors that she could be going somewhere else. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I don't know if I would. I don't know if I want to like even humor the trade rumors. Because I mean, you preface this perfectly, in my opinion, because it's not so much that it's a rumor mill versus just business as usual. I mean,
Yeah.
Macario's contract when she signed and made the decision to go pro, signed with Lyon, and that contract was going to be up in 2023. So, and I think even prior to landing on Lyon, the clubs that were interested even back then were Bayern Munich and Barcelona. So, if anything, it's just more of a regurgitation of what happened 3 years ago. Where's Katarina Macario going? Is it going to be Lyon, Bayern, or Barcelona? And now that's being repeated now 3 years later.
Yeah.
And that's fine, because you know what? the contract is almost up. So we should talk about that a little bit. World Cup, right? Big year. Katarina Macario, a player who has been a part of U.S. women's national team camps and rosters for quite some time now. A player that they are clearly, invested in and with, in terms of, being an integral part of the team. And yeah, tying this with the ACL news and injuries,
Mhm.
we've chatted a little bit about this, as when it first happened in June. And I think one of the things that has happened anytime over the course of 2022, when we have had to find ourselves chatting about player injury, we've also had to chat about it in the sense of the potential timeline of things. And I think at this point in time, we're talking about big injuries to players, like other big players like a Beth Mead or a Viv Miedema. Like, we're looking at that World Cup in front of
Yeah.
them, and that essentially puts things in jeopardy because of the timeline of things. And then when we maybe look at somebody like a Katarina Macario, I think it also depends on the level of ACL injury. Is it a partial tear, a full tear? We're talking about ruptured ACLs. My goodness. This injury occurred for her in June of 2022. So this timeline of us potentially seeing her back in the mix for the She Believes Cup, or
Yeah.
post She Believes Cup even, I think is very promising for the US women's national team. And I think it could also be very promising for the direction in which she wants to take her career. I think a player like Kat Macario is at this point, we're talking about two different players, right? We're talking about a Debinha and where she wants to take that next step of her career as someone who's sort of in her prime,
Yeah.
and then versus somebody like Kat Macario, who is probably still developing and but also nearly equally as talented, right? So we're just like, where could she go? Does she want to come back stateside? I mean, we're talking about
I
a
know.
league that has continued to grow in NWSL. There's not one but two California sides now. And it's not just your pick of 10 teams, who could potentially want to add you to the mix, but 12. So I would imagine that because of her injury right now, I would imagine that because of the World Cup in front of her, she's going to take a look at everything in terms of all the options that are out there. But the Lyon Group, they're going through a transition themselves. They're going to have
Yep.
new ownership. That was, a bit of news that, if you're talking about a club that has, frequently invested in its women's side. Jean-Michel Aulas has basically said that there's been a switch in ownership. They're going to transition. He's going to stay on for at least 3 years as president, to kind of keep his term going on, and to probably aid in the transition of things. So what is that going to mean for things like a negotiating period or anything like that? I would imagine that stalls things as well. So we'll see if
Yeah.
this is just like I said, like it's a little bit of Back to the Future. Like, when we were first talking about Macario going pro, was it going to be Lyon? Was it going to be Bayern? Was it going to be Barcelona? And like, here we are again 3 years later. There's
Same
potential for that again.
conversation.
Keep it going. Yeah, no, I would love to see it. Do you
And
want to
and
see her land? Where do you want to see her land?
I mean, this is a type of player that I like. This is maybe a cop out answer. I just want to see her play again. I miss
Yeah,
watching her play,
yeah.
right? Like I do. I think it would. I think that her time at Lyon has been tremendous for her as a player and as an
Oh man,
athlete.
really, she won a Champions League.
I mean, completely. And I think the growth of her personal game was elevated being there. Now, what's to say that that wouldn't have happened anywhere she went? But I do think that the type of athletes that she was competing alongside and playing against and winning a Champions League, that type of experience just gives you a different perspective
Yeah,
on the game and on professionalism and how to be a professional athlete. I think that it would be really cool to see her go somewhere like Barcelona, right? Like that would be fantastic for her. I think that she could also help out a team like Barca pretty in-depthly. And as you head into this World Cup year, this is a player that wants to be on the World Cup roster for the United States. I don't think that she's coming back to the NWSL or like coming to the NWSL. I think she stays in Europe for the time being, just with how her development of the game has gone so far. I think it would be beneficial for her to stay there. So I think I want to see her go to Barcelona, but who knows? I don't know what's going to happen.
Well, listen. I would love to see it, but I'm also like we're talking about we're weaving in ACL chatter within some of this rumor mill stuff, but I mean that's a team that's also been dealing with injury. You know, Alexa Putellas has been out and sidelined with an ACL injury, missed out on the Euros because of it. My goodness, Carolyn Graham Hansen has been dealing with injury as well. So it's like if they were even to get somebody like a Macario, like how does she fit in with the caliber of talent on that team? Like whose spot is he essentially taking? It's definitely piqued a lot of curiosity, my own included. But yeah, I don't know. I know there's a lot of folks that want to see, would love to see her play in NWSL, but I'm with you. I don't know if that's necessarily
I would
going to
too.
be.
I would love to see her play in the
Right,
NWSL.
selfishly, come on
could
through.
see her in person all the time, Sandra. I would get to call games where Kat's playing, but I just don't think that's happening at this point. I don't think she's coming back to the NWSL. I don't. I think she's staying.
Well, she's never been here. So
I know. I'm sorry, not coming back. I don't think she's coming to the NWSL.
That's the other thing too. Well, yeah, no, that's the other side of it too. It's like, I think folks are wondering like, well, like is this not going to be a spot for her for even in the future of her career? It'll be interesting to see. I mean, Lyon also is home to Lindsay Horan right now at the moment. Her contract is going to be through at a certain point. Has a contract in place with Thorns for she does, whenever she does return. I believe it's 2025. So listen, there's a lot to keep an eye on in terms of Lyon and Americans who are overseas. So we'll see how that pans out. I would anticipate that the chatter around that will probably get louder as that timeline for Macario's contract gets closer and closer and closer.
And also how her recovery does, right? Like I think we'll find out a bit more, especially from Vlatko Andonovski, because people are always asking him in terms of like US soccer, how her recovery is doing. That's how we found out where she is on her recovery journey and that she should be back on the field by the end of February. So January camps are coming up. There's the January camp where the US will be in New Zealand. I doubt she'll be on that roster just based on her recovery, but I think that'll be an opportunity maybe where we hear her timeline to recovery. And I think that also plays a factor in some teams that are looking at her, right? Like,
how about this? Let's pivot a little bit. What if Katarina Macario had even more teams and more markets to take a look at in NWSL? Would that entice a player of her caliber? Because that's some news that we got to talk about.
Talk about a transition.
Snaps, baby. Look, NWSL expansion in the news. It's been narrowed down to 3 teams reporting out of Sportico, saying that the 3 cities for final contention alongside the return of a franchise in Utah are Tampa, Boston, and the San Francisco, aka Bay Area, for NWSL expansion, reporting that the highest initial bid is over $40 million. Once upon a time, we'll say pre-COVID, franchises in NWSL 2 to 5 million price tags in terms of expansion fees, right? So we'll see. It's exciting. I think the reporting has been out there. Shout out to Jeff Kassouf, has been on the Utah Royals news for quite some time, and I think with we're looking at 2024. People could say, yes, we know that one of the potential 2 teams is going to be the Utah Royals, but who could possibly be this second expansion franchise coming into the league? And a lot of excitement, I think, for folks who have been here a little while, like myself included. I got really excited to see that Boston was in the mix for this one. What was your reaction when you saw all this?
I was a little surprised at Tampa being in the mix for this. It had been reported by NWSL Commissioner Jessica Berman. This was at the NWSL Championship at the end of October that there were so many teams and so many cities that were interested in joining the NWSL and being one of those expansion sides. But very quickly, you can rule out a lot of different cities based on how much they've already gathered, the investors that are interested, if the facilities are in place, if they have a plan for a facility, because all of those things need to be set in stone already before the league can say, yes, we accept you at this point. So the fact that Utah is coming back into the NWSL, that's fantastic because they've had a team there before. They understand. We'll kind of see how it rolls out this time around, that they can be there a little bit longer. The Bay Area in San Francisco, we've heard a lot of chatter about former players, former professionals, former U.S. internationals that have their hand in the Bay Area team and getting an NWSL team there. There has been a lot of publicity and chatter about that. So not at all surprised to see San Francisco on this final 3 list. Boston is a city that had a team, the Breakers, that were there. They ended up folding or relocating right to North Carolina. No. They just folded. That was the Boston team that just folded.
Yep.
So I'm not so surprised that Boston is back on the table because, frankly, there are not a lot of teams in the Northeast. There's Gotham in New Jersey, New York, and then Washington, D.C. And that's kind of the extent of it. So putting one above New York to hit those Northeastern cities and states, I think is a good idea. But Tampa was the one for me that was a little bit out of left field.
Was that the combo breaker? You were like, hold on a second.
I was like, where did Tampa come from? I just don't foresee it happening, right? I foresee, I mean, between these 3, I think it's going to San Francisco, and this is just Lisa Roman taking a guess at this, but I imagine that Boston is still in that conversation. I don't know enough about Tampa to know who's involved, who are the investors, where are they going to put this? Is there a fan base there that wants this? Because we know Orlando is in the center of the state, so kind of how is this going to balance out? California is a much bigger state to have 2 teams than Florida, which is not as big.
Well, I mean, we look, if we're just going off of recency, we had 2 California expansion sides in 2022, and they were quite successful. I think we saw a San Diego Wave FC side make it all the way to the semifinals, pretty much stay within the top 3 of the table throughout their entire inaugural season. We saw them pivot from a collegiate stadium to a much bigger collegiate stadium in Snapdragon, different, better facility than in terms of which they got their start. Then we saw similarly with Angel City. They remained in playoff contention, but fell just short. Also had to deal with some injuries along the way. But from Challenge Cup to the regular season, watching that team play their games at, Banc of California Stadium and not just any plain old regular soccer environment. We're talking about a bunch of sellouts throughout the regular season. We're talking about, thousands of season ticket holders. The success for an NWSL team in California, the bar has been set quite high.
I agree.
So I'm with you in that we've seen success out of NWSL sides in California within 1 year. And then we've got Orlando franchise in Florida that has been a very, very mixed bag of results. I think one playoff appearance, right, for Orlando Pride, I think since their expansion into the league in 2016. And who knows, maybe this will be the moment of a little bit of a reset button for them now that they've, made the official hiring of Seb Hines as head coach. We haven't seen or heard too much in terms of the offseason signings for them in terms of a big, marquee type of player. I know Marta is, still sort of, on the roster, and this is a big, experienced player. They've announced some re-signings like, Erica Timrak, Carrie Lawrence. We've talked about that. Viviana Vela Corta. These are young players that they maybe want to continue to build around. So to sort of have that as the example, then I'm with you in terms of seeing a Tampa franchise potentially come in. And I believe for Tampa, the Tampa Bay's ownership group is involved in that as well, which is I'm very curious about that as well, because I remember not too long ago, their MLB franchise kind of being in flux as well. I think they made a pitch at one point to MLB to be like the first dual market
Yeah.
team. Like they wanted to have like some of their games in Tampa Bay and some of them in Montreal, Canada. And I was like, okay, well, that's interesting.
Uh-huh.
So what, like, is that the energy that they're bringing to NWSL? I don't know if that's the energy that they're bringing, but I think it's going to come down to the money, the
Mhm.
investorship, the resources, what that looks like. I think
I mean,
moving
that's what it's
forward,
gonna come down to any of these 3 cities, right? Like, if they actually have the money to back and support this, and that they can provide a vital pitch to the league, that they will aim to have success in the
I
first year.
I think that's people's. I think that there are question marks. I think when people saw markets like the Bay Area or Boston, like what does that look like? Where are these teams going to play if they
Mhm.
end up winning the bid? But it's exciting to have narrowed down the field. I mean, we've been talking about expansion for quite some time now, and to go from hundreds and hundreds of applicants to narrowing it down to
Mhm.
a dozen or 10 or so, which we heard. Um, Commissioner Berman during the NWSL championship final saying that that was the next phase, that they wanted to narrow down all of those bidders, and now reporting that it's down to 3 teams. So probably sooner rather than later, we'll know who
I
that
mean,
second expansion team is going to be in 2024.
I'm thinking that we'll find out pretty soon. How crazy to think that in 2021 there was 0 teams in California, and by 2024 we could potentially have 3. But like you said, San Diego and LA, they had really good first seasons in the league, and they had fans show up. They broke records, and they're only what 2.5 hours apart driving distance. And if the Bay Area were to win the bid for an NWSL team, that's like what 6-7 hours north. Like it's a whole different state if you're living in the Northeast over here.
You have to. I will be curious to see if it's the Bay Area,
I
what
know.
a sort of trifecta type of rivalry
Oh
will be
yeah.
named or what it'll be called. Interesting. We'll keep an eye on it for sure. We've been talking
And
about it forever. We've had multiple Bay
I
Area
know.
connections on the show. We've had Brandy Chastain, Ellie Wagner, Danielle Slayton on the show. We'll see. It's an exciting time in the off season for sure to
And
sort of chat
and then
about this kind of stuff.
we get to see new crests, new colors, new
Yep.
kits. Like that's also fun. We're not there yet. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Look, it's exciting to talk about. It's good things to get happy over. Let's chat a little bit before we take a break about some other things that came on the radar in terms of contract news. Again, free agency perhaps hitting a little bit of a dry spell due to the fact that the holiday season is upon us. But there's been some re-signings. Haley Mace and Kansas City Current announcing a new contract, re-signed for 3 years. Ellie Prysock re-signed with Houston Dash. I thought that was very, very big for the Dash. I really like the pairing of Prysock and Katie Naughton, and I think it's going to continue to be helpful for them moving forward. Sort of have that dual position solidified. And Amber Brooks, a 1-year deal with the Spirit. That is the bit of the free agency news. Brooks, a longtime veteran of the league, listed amongst all those free agents this year, and will be with the Spirit on a 1-year deal. And something else we'll have to keep an eye on moving forward is Houston Dash announcing that they're going to reveal their head coach. So that's coming down the pipeline this week as well. So we'll have to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, lots of re-signings, and that's kind of the name of the game the last couple of weeks, and even I think until the new year that we'll see. I don't think anything too crazy will drop, except hopefully Houston new head coach, because that's a team that really needs to lock one up, especially after having 2 re-signings, or Ali Prysock saying that she's going to stay there, which is huge, as you said, and I think Haley May staying with Kansas City. That's one that I um, was not at all surprised to see, but really happy to see. This is a player that I think did tremendously last year for Kansas City, and she got herself a call up back to the national team. It's a great player, but not too many crazy moves and trades happening, just a little bit of status quo, but we wanted to keep everyone updated for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Excited to see who the Dash are going to be bringing into the head coaching position, and I'm sure putting the kind of the announcement on the radar. I'm sure has folks sort of speculating about who it could be or who they would like it to be in that position. Ella Massar recently announcing her departure from Kansas City Current. as an assistant. I'm not too sure if she's a candidate in this one as well. I know there's a lot. The vetting process is going to be so much different now for teams moving forward. So in terms of licensing and head coaches or candidates who are interested in head coaching positions and what that looks like. I know there are connections, for Massar with the Dash, but not sure if everything else is up to par. But we'll see what happens there. Obviously, we covered Rin Wilkinson and her departure and resignation of the Thorns. Did the Dash immediately try to get her into interviews as well? I don't know. We'll see. We'll have the news, coming through this week and eventually get to chat about that. But there's some other things we got to chat about as well on the international side of things. So we're going to do that right after a quick break.
Paramount Plus. Movies, live sports, and lots of kids stuff. Originals with more than meets the eye. Come join me on the Enterprise. Paramount Plus. Mountain of entertainment for us. 'Tis the season for streaming, so don't delay your mountain holiday.
Celebrate this holiday season with Paramount Plus.
All right, let's keep the holiday spirit moving. Talk about all things soccer. Let's talk about FIFA a little bit. Yes. There was a World Cup that just concluded. Congratulations to Leo Messi and Argentina for lifting the 2022 World Cup, alongside the build-up to that championship final. FIFA made some pretty big announcements, or reintroduced some former announcements, because some of this news has sort of been out there already, with FIFA and their future plans. But basically saying that the Women's World Cup that is going to take place in 2027 and 2031, the hosts for those two World Cup events are going to be decided in 2024 and 2025, and just reiterating the expansion of Olympic women's teams from 12 to 16, that is something that they are still looking into, and also introducing some other tournaments along the way.
Yeah, FIFA coming out with a number of announcements. They said that they were going to have two new women's football tournaments, one of them being the women's women's futsal World Cup, and also a club World Cup, which there have been rumors about this before the club World Cup, and they've resurfaced from FIFA about what they're going to do, but there hasn't been any definite plans set in place. But one thing about the Club World Cup that I think is kind of cool is that it's the only way for a club team to be able to say, I am the best in the world. Because once you win your league, there's nowhere else to go, right? Like, that's it. That's the epitome. And because soccer is such a world sport, there's no way to determine, because there's no World Champions League, right? Club World Cup. That's something that I think would be interesting and kind of cool, but it's also I don't even know if it's going to happen, right? We've heard this before. It's like they're giving us the ring around at this point. What do you think? Do you want a Club World Cup?
100%. I'm team Club World Cup. I think we've wanted to see that on the women's side for quite some time. Especially in this era in which we're looking at women's pro leagues and their longevity. They're still very, very, very young leagues when you're comparing it to some, brands and teams and leagues that have been around for many years, right? But we're looking at different professional leagues, whether it's NWSL, Women's Super League, even, Women's A League, leagues that have been around for a decade plus now, in combination with leagues that are maybe a bit younger, or like a league like, Liga MX Femenil. So I'm here for it. I would love to see it, but I think at this point, whenever these types of announcements sort of get brought into the big landscape, I mean, look, it was the President Infantino, reiterated these things in a week in the build-up to a World Cup final. And it didn't have a lot of substance. It didn't have a lot of planning within it. It's just a president on a podium saying, and then this, and then that, and how about this as well? And that's great, there's a lot of us out here that would love that stuff and love to see it, but what's the plan? What's the course of action? What's the infrastructure? What's the resource? What does all of that look like? So yeah, I would love that. Would love a club World Cup. I
Me
think
too.
we've covered women's ICC, we've covered the Women's Cup over the last couple of years now. I think even those very small kind of round robin-esque style type of tournaments already show that there's a huge interest in having a bigger version of that. And I remember when we covered Women's Cup, we were so excited that they even expanded it.
I
They
know.
went from 4 teams to 6 teams. We were like, oh, this is very cool, very exciting. So I think the enthusiasm is there and the teams are there, right?
Yeah.
The clubs, the franchises are there, the leagues are there in which to pull these teams from. And I think that's the equally frustrating part of it. It's like the stuff is there, like let's get to planning and let's get to hashing all this out. So we'll see. I think it's exciting to have the the deadline on things in terms of the host city,
Right. I agree.
nations. It's like who's going to be the host for the 2027 and 2031 World Cups. We're going to find out in the next couple of years.
That's like crazy to think about. 2031.
I know.
I believe that's 2023 in like a couple weeks.
I know it's wild to think about, but also exciting. I'm curious to see like
exciting.
Who's going to put together their bid and what that's going to look like. Are we going to continue are we going to continue to see this kind of trend of co-nations teaming up and putting together bids? It was primarily going to be Australia as their bid, and then New Zealand was involved, and it was a great pitch for 2 co-hosting nations for this upcoming World Cup. I mean, the 2026 World Cup is going to be a trio of nations. It's going to be a North American World Cup. So games are primarily going to be in the United States.
Yeah.
There's 2 host cities in Canada, 3 host cities in Mexico. So what is 2027 and 2023 going to look like for the Women's World Cup? I know Colombia, they had a very strong bid for the 2023 World Cup as well. I would love to see Colombia back in the mix for this as well. I would love to see a Women's World Cup hosted in a Latin American nation. So I'm excited for us to sort of cover that in the next coming years as well.
Yeah, I think it's super exciting. And the fact that they already told us we're going to find out in 2024 and 2025 for 27 and 31, like the planning can start. And that's something that nations need time, right? To be able to plan and to be able to build structures that they need or organize what's going to happen. But you're right. I mean, this is the first step that they're making these announcements. It is the first step in getting some answers, and maybe we'll hear some of the bids that come out, and we'll find out by 2024. That way, then like the plans can already be put into place, right? We can continue to move forward, especially coming off the very end of the World Cup in 2023. We should be deciding the next one and understanding what's going on from there. I mean, it's a great opportunity for so many different nations to do this, and for the Club World Cup, we'll see. Fingers crossed on my behalf, but who knows?
Yeah, fingers crossed. U.S. Soccer making some announcements of their own end of the year awards getting announced. Let's take a look at the nominees for U.S. Soccer Young Female Player of the Year. Onyeka Gamero, Riley Jackson, Olivia Moultrie, Jaden Shaw, Alyssa Thompson amongst the nominees for this one. Who's standing out for you, Lisa?
This one's tricky. I mean, these are just incredible athletes. You look at Gamero, 16-year-old forward, Jackson, also incredibly young. For people that are in the world of NWSL, Olivia Moultrie, she plays at Portland Thorns. Jaden Shaw, she went through a process this year to get into the league and be a professional athlete at her age. She was training with Washington Spirit for a long time and ended up going to San Diego Wave. And then Alyssa Thompson, who plays on a U17 boys team, she got her first international senior cap with the U.S. women's national team this year. I mean, these players are fantastic. I think someone like Jaden Shaw, though, it stands out to me a little bit more with what she's been able to do professionally in the professional league and kind of breaking that boundary to get into the league and play with a team. And then she scores a goal in her first match that she plays with San Diego. I think that was pretty impressive. And then on the international side of things, like she contributed a lot to what the U.S. World Cup was doing. They didn't have the best run that maybe they wanted this year, but I think Shaw stands out to me the most out of these 5 players.
Yeah, I'm with you. Listen, Moultrie, part of that, NWSL championship winning Portland Thorns side. Jaden Shaw getting all the way to the semifinals with the Wave. I'm with you. I feel like there's a lot of competition in this one, whereas maybe before in the past there was a little bit of a breakaway kind of candidate amongst the nominees. I don't know if that's necessarily the case for this year's version. I think there's a lot of strong candidates here for Young Player of the Year. Let's talk about the nominees that they put out for Female Player of the Year. In terms of the senior women's national team, it's Alex Morgan, Rose Lavelle, Lindsay Horan, Mallory Pugh, Sophia Smith. You surprised by any of these names listed here, or they all sort of seem like the right nominees for you?
I'm not at all surprised by these 5 players. I think that some of them maybe stand out a little bit more than others. I think if you looked at just the beginning of 2022, you'd be a little surprised to see Alex Morgan on that list because she wasn't really back into the mix until the middle of last year of this year of 2022. But she's a player that rose to the occasion for U.S. soccer and what she wanted to do for them. No, not surprised at any of these. I also don't think there's anyone like entirely left off that I'm like, you need to be on this list, right? I think for me, these 5 are good. When you have to pick 5, I go with them. But my winner, clear and obvious, Sophia Smith. I think Sophia Smith deserves this hands down with the 11 goals that she scored this year for U.S. soccer, the run she went on in domestic play with the NWSL, winning league MVP championship, and then winning the title game MVP. It's Smith. There's no question mark about it. That's why I'm like, look at Lindsay Horan. That's fine. Look at Rose Lavelle. They had a great year. But like, to me, they're not even in the running. I think I could see some people making arguments for Alex Morgan to be this type of player. I also think Mallory Pugh, with the assists that she put up this year for U.S. soccer, people could make arguments for her, but it's clear and obvious winner to me is Sophia Smith.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's funny to go from the young player nominees to just the player nominees, and the energy is like, wow, there's a lot of great candidates here. Who's it going to go to in the young player category? And then we get to this one and we're both like, no, there's a clear answer here.
I mean, Sophia Smith could like kind of be a young player too. She's also like so young.
Give her both.
Yeah, give her both, frankly.
I'm with you. I think you're looking at the nominees for this one, and like I said, there is a clear answer, and the answer is Sophia Smith. I think, yes, you can make a case for Mallory Pugh. I would anticipate that maybe those are the top 2, but it's Smith all the way. I think if you want to include things like club performance, you could, but again, this is U.S. soccer, so we're just looking at national team performance, and it's still Smith. I think for both you and I, we will see how the votes shake out for those 2 categories and see, which of the candidates get the award for both categories. So, listen, everybody, if you joined us in the later stage of this episode, the second half after the break, I want to remind you that we have been nominated for an award. It's our 3rd time being nominated in 2022. We're quite excited about it. The Signal Awards for Best Episode. We are thrilled to have the support. So please, if you can continue that support and click on the link in the episode description or use the QR code on the screen to vote for us. We would really, really, really appreciate it. It would be a great holiday gift. Wink, wink, nod, nod for your favorite co-hosts out there. We're so happy that you joined us today live this morning on A3. Thank you so much for listening. Download, follow, listen to us anywhere you get your podcast. You could watch us too. So here's your reminder to subscribe to us on YouTube to get alerts for whenever we go live. youtube.com/attacking3rd. Vote for A3 for the best episode in the Signal Awards. For Sandra Herrera and Lisa Roman, this was Attacking Third.